Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump in Rome for Pope Francis's funeral. Iris Tao tells us which leaders he'll be talking to, and the latest with trade talks between the U.S. and China. The FBI arrests a Wisconsin judge, saying they have evidence she obstructed an immigration arrest operation. Chris Spears has that update, plus what U.S. Border Patrol leaders in Arizona said today about hiring illegal immigrants. Luigi Mangione, the man accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson last year, pleaded not guilty to all federal charges against him in the case. New York prosecutors are formally seeking the death penalty against him. Arlene Richards with the latest in that case. The U.S. will begin its third consecutive session of nuclear talks with Iran tomorrow. Sam Wong tells us what's potentially on the table. The UN's World Food Program says they've run out of food in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, the wife of a hostage sees the first signs that he is alive in almost a year. Jason Perry reports. President Trump says the U.S. is close to reaching multiple deals with Russia, including stopping the fighting in Ukraine. Arian Pazdar has more on that and what Trump says about a possible meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. The FBI arrested a county judge in Wisconsin for allegedly helping an illegal immigrant evade arrest. FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed this on X earlier today. NTD's Chris Spears has the details.
FBI Director Kash Patel announced the arrest of Wisconsin Judge Hannah Dugan on Friday, saying there was evidence that she obstructed an immigration arrest operation last week. In a post on X, he wrote, "We believe Judge Dugan intentionally misdirected federal agents away from the subject to be arrested in her courthouse, Eduardo Flores Ruiz, allowing the subject, an illegal alien, to evade arrest." A spokesperson for the U.S. Marshals Service said Dugan was arrested at a courthouse on Friday morning. Court documents detailing the case were not immediately available. In other immigration news, U.S. Border Patrol leaders in Arizona today highlighted the implications of employing illegal immigrants.
U.S.-based employers and companies who knowingly hire illegal labor are also responsible for driving the demand for human smuggling into the United States. Human smuggling that results in far too many deaths and far too much abuse, contrary to our values as a nation. In short, if you hire illegal labor, you are funding the cartels.
Justin Delatorre of the U.S. Border Patrol thanked farmers who legally employ foreign workers through the H-2A visa program. The USDA says about 50% of all agricultural workers in the United States are present illegally.
The desire to cross illegally fuels the cartels as they make extensive profits off this type of organized crime. One of the cartel's tactics is they use foot guides or coyotes to guide people through the deserts, through the mountain ranges. These foot guides and the smugglers that bring them here do not care about their lives. They care solely off profiting off of them. And they will abandon them in an instant to save themselves.
The Border Patrol says some of those abandoned die of dehydration in the scorching desert. That's why the Yuma, Arizona section of the southern border has installed over 100 signs and dozens of emergency stations that help people contact rescue authorities. Chris Spears, NTD News.
President Trump is in Rome to join dozens of world leaders at the funeral for Pope Francis. He's expected to mingle with world leaders amid talks on trade and tariffs. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
President Trump is now in Rome to attend Pope Francis' funeral on Saturday. On his way out of the White House, he told reporters that he will be using the occasion to make some diplomatic efforts.
It's going to be very interesting. We're going to meet with a lot of the foreign leaders they want to meet.
Dozens of world leaders will be in Rome this weekend. President Trump says he will be speaking with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and could meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. It comes, though, as U.S. and China continue to clash over whether or not trade talks are taking place. While China on Friday continued to deny any ongoing talks, President Trump, in a Time magazine interview published on Friday, says China's Xi Jinping has called him, but when asked further by reporters, Trump keeping it vague.
Tariffs. When did you last
I don't want to comment on that, but I've spoken to him many times.
On whether the multiple times he's talking about here referred to times after inauguration, President Trump says he doesn't want to talk about it, though asked that he is talking with a lot of people from China. And on tariffs, President Trump says he won't drop tariffs on China unless there is a substantial concession.
Well, I'm not going to drop them unless they give us something that's, substantial. Otherwise, I'm not going to drop them.
Meanwhile, with other countries, Trump said in an interview that he's made 200 deals. While it's unclear which countries the president is talking about, his Treasury Secretary has signaled that the first deal could come as early as next week with South Korea. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
And President Trump's first 100 days is coming up on Tuesday. NTD will have all-day coverage and analysis of his promises, progress, challenges, and a lot more on his second term. Don't miss it. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is slated to lead another round of nuclear talks with Iran tomorrow. This will come just 1 week after a meeting in Rome, where both countries said progress was made. NTD's Sam Wang has the details.
Coming up this Saturday, U.S. and Iranian officials will begin their third round of nuclear talks in Oman. The upcoming phase of the negotiations will be led by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and State Department Director of Policy Planning Michael Anton. President Trump reiterating his confidence in the negotiations on Friday.
And Iran, I think, is going very well. We'll see what happens. We're working on plenty of things that shouldn't be worked on because none of this stuff should have happened.
Trump has given Iran 60 days to finalize a deal with the U.S., laying out his red line that the Islamic regime cannot obtain a nuclear weapon. In his latest interview with Time magazine, Trump says he's open to meet with Iran's Ayatollah, but he said that military action against Iranian nuclear sites is possible if the deal falls through, something he repeatedly vowed in the past few weeks.
I think we're doing very well with respect to Iran, and we're having very serious meetings. And there are only two options. And the one option is not a good option. We could have a very, very good decision, and a lot of lives will be saved.
While negotiations remain open between the two countries, no details have been announced on a possible deal. Earlier this week, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Iran could be allowed to have a civilian nuclear program that relies solely on imported uranium. Iran rejected the proposal. Sam Wang, NTD News, Washington, D.C.
The UN's World Food Program, which has been providing aid to people in the Gaza Strip, says they've now run out of food in the territory. Meanwhile, the wife of a hostage speaks after seeing the first signs in almost a year that he's still alive. NTD's Jason Perry brings us the latest.
Israeli forces have been blocking humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip for about 8 weeks now, saying that Hamas uses the aid to support its terrorist activity. On Friday, the UN's World Food Program said they have now completely run out of food to give to residents in the Gaza Strip.
The 25 bakeries we used to support across Gaza Strip, serving 800,000 people, are no longer operational. And food parcels, so core to our program, intended to reach half of the population in Gaza, have been fully distributed.
The World Food Program was supporting 37 kitchens in the Gaza Strip and providing about 500,000 meals every day. It was not immediately clear how many kitchens will still be running if those shut down. Israel has previously denied that Gaza is facing a hunger crisis. In another development, Israel released the findings of an ongoing investigation into the death of a UN worker who was reportedly at a UN site in the Gaza Strip when he was killed. On Friday, Israel said the UN worker was killed by Israeli tank fire and that troops struck the building because they assessed an enemy presence and didn't identify it as a UN facility. Israel said they expressed deep sorrow for the loss and sent condolences to the family. Meanwhile, the family of hostage Omri Moran saw the first signs he was alive in almost a year after Hamas released a video of him on Thursday. Omri's wife spoke of their 2 daughters who haven't seen him in 556 days.
How do I explain to them that the world keeps turning while their father remains trapped in the hands of the terrorists? How can this be happening? How can the world allow this to continue?
And she called on President Trump to make a deal to bring all of the hostages home. On the same day, Israel's chief of the general staff, Eyal Zamir, was in the Gaza Strip, and he said that if Israel doesn't see progress in the return of the hostages, they're going to expand operations and increase their intensity. And on Friday, Zamir and Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, met with the commander of the U.S. Central Command, General Michael Kurilla. Israel has now taken over more than half of the Gaza Strip since they renewed operations in March. Jason Perry, NTD News.
President Trump is hinting at a possible meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is in Moscow today, meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pozdar has the Ukraine update.
They're meeting with Putin right now as we speak, and we have a lot of things going on, and I think in the end we're going to end up with a lot of good deals.
President Trump on Friday saying Russia and Ukraine are close to reaching multiple deals, including an agreement for peace, tariff deals, and more. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Friday. Witkoff is Washington's key negotiator with Putin as Trump pushes for a deal to end the fighting. Witkoff already held 3 long meetings with the Kremlin leader. And Trump says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has not signed a minerals deal yet. Trump made the announcement on social media on Friday, saying the deal is at least 3 weeks late. Hopefully, it will be signed immediately. Trump wants to use Ukraine's minerals as a financial guarantee for the aid the U.S. has been sending to Ukraine. He added that work on the overall peace deal between Russia and Ukraine is going smoothly. Success seems to be in the future. The president is heading to Rome on Friday for the Pope's funeral. Various international leaders are expected to be in Italy as well.
Will you be meeting with the president? I'll be meeting with the Italians, yes. Your prime minister? No, with President Zelensky. Oh, it's possible.
This comes just one day after a Russian strike on Ukraine's capital city reportedly killed at least 12 civilians. The mayor of Kiev now says Zelensky might have to temporarily cede land to Russia in order to get peace. Former heavyweight boxer turned politician Vitaly Klitschko told the BBC that one of the scenarios is to give up territory. It's not fair, but for the peace, temporary peace, maybe it can be a solution, temporary. Klitschko is a political rival of Zelensky, and the pair have clashed publicly before. In 2023, the former boxing champion accused Zelensky of having authoritarian tendencies. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
The U.S. is opening up deep-sea mining for critical minerals used to make electronics and weapons. Will this produce enough of a supply to meet U.S. demand? And what does it mean for U.S. national security? Here are insights from Jeremy Harrell, CEO of ClearPath, a conservative clean energy organization. Tune into NTD's Capital Report at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Coming up, Luigi Mangione, the man accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson last year, pleaded not guilty to all federal charges against him in the case. New York prosecutors are formally seeking the death penalty against him. Arlene Richards reports. Former Congressman George Santos is sentenced after pleading guilty to fraud. Today's hearing marks the latest defeat for the ex-lawmaker after he was expelled from the House of Representatives. And the Trump administration eases regulations on self-driving cars, citing competition with China and the importance of domestic innovation. Jason Blair brings us the details when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The 26-year-old accused murderer Luigi Mangione pleaded not guilty at a hearing today to federal charges. Meanwhile, yesterday, prosecutors informed the court that they would seek the death penalty. NTD's Arlene Richards has more on why they believe Mangione is dangerous.
On Friday, Mangione pleaded not guilty on charges of murder and stalking in the federal case against him. Prosecutors on Thursday gave the Southern District of New York federal court advance notice of their intent to seek the death penalty against accused murderer Luigi Mangione. Mangione has been charged with the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in December 2024. The notice alleged that Mangione presents a future danger because he expressed intent to target an entire industry and rally political and social opposition to that industry by engaging in an act of lethal violence. Earlier this month, Attorney General Pam Bondi directed federal prosecutors to seek capital punishment for Mangione. In an April 1st statement, Bondi said the death of Thompson, who headed the biggest health insurer in the United States, was a premeditated, cold-blooded assassination that shocked America. The Department of Justice alleged last year that Mangione meticulously planned Thompson's murder over several months in an effort to initiate a public discussion about the healthcare industry. The department has reported that Mangione was found in a Pennsylvania restaurant with, among other things, a 9mm pistol and a sound suppressor consistent with the weapon used to kill Thompson. Mangione, a prep school and Ivy League graduate, is facing both federal and state charges. He previously pled not guilty to murder, terrorism, and other charges filed by state prosecutors in New York. If convicted in the federal case, the jury would determine in a separate phase of the trial whether or not to recommend the death penalty. Any such recommendation would need to be unanimous, and the judge would be required to impose it. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
A federal judge today sentenced former Congressman George Santos to 87 months in prison. The former New York lawmaker was convicted last year for wire fraud and identity theft. Santos appealed for mercy, telling the court that he was, quote, humbled and chastised. The Long Island Republican sobbed as he said he realized he had betrayed his constituents' trust. Santos drew national attention for lying about his work history, education, and even religion when he ran for Congress in 2022. The New York Congressman served in the House for a year before his colleagues expelled him in 2023. As part of his plea deal, Santos has agreed to pay roughly $580,000 in penalties, in addition to his 7-year sentence. The Department of Transportation says American-made self-driving cars will soon have less red tape. The Transportation Secretary says the U.S. needs to stay in the lead over China. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has the update.
America is in the middle of an innovation race with China, and the stakes couldn't be higher.
Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy says the Department of Transportation will ease some safety regulations for autonomous vehicle development. The move is to make sure the U.S. maintains global dominance in the industry as well as encourage domestic innovation. Secretary Duffy says that autonomous vehicles that are made overseas qualify for a quick exemption process, while vehicles made here in the U.S. must go through a stringent permit process.
This makes zero sense. We've now fixed this by expanding the AV exemption program so domestic vehicles, they're included.
According to a letter by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the program will exempt domestic AV automakers from safety regulations only for vehicles intended for research and demonstration purposes.
The long-term goal here is to move us closer to a single national standard.
Secretary Duffy also announced that the DOT has streamlined the process for autonomous vehicle makers to report crashes to the department, which makers were saying was too costly. The Autonomous Vehicle Industry Association welcomed the move, saying it's a, quote, bold and necessary step to stimulate domestic AV innovation. John Bozella, the CEO of Alliance for Automotive Innovation, responded with a statement saying, yes, we've got to move smartly and safely, but this announcement shows the administration is also proceeding with a sense of urgency so we don't cede AV leadership to China and other countries. The advocates for highway and auto safety expressed discontent, highlighting the importance of improving data on the safety of operating autonomous vehicles on public roads. They said without safeguards, safety regulations, transparency, and accountability, the success of AV deployment is imperiled at best and could result in deadly consequences at worst. The Trump administration has been taking steps to keep ahead of China in several other areas with economic and national security concerns, including artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency. In January, the Biden administration banned connected and self-driving vehicles containing tech from China and Russia, citing cybersecurity concerns. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Coming up, analysts are calling Russia a junior partner in the Chinese Communist Party's network of international oppression. Luis Martinez explains how the CCP has enabled the Kremlin's war machine. And inside China's most sensitive circle, a major shakeup inside the regime is broiling. What could it mean for Washington's top adversary, Communist China? Analysts break it down after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Analysts are calling Russia a junior partner in the Chinese Communist Party's network of international oppression. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez breaks down how the CCP has enabled the Kremlin's war machine and extended a lifeline to the Russian economy.
The Chinese Communist Party has been propping up the socialist regime in Venezuela since 1999, and the CCP's support for the Ayatollah's regime in Iran dates back to the early stages of the Islamic Revolution in 1979. But there is one world leader that Xi Jinping has been meeting on average 5 times per year since he rose to power in 2013, for a total of 63 meetings thus far, and that is Russian President Vladimir Putin. In 2001, a year after Putin rose to power, the CCP and Russia upgraded their diplomatic ties to that of a strategic partnership. Since then, the Russian regime of Vladimir Putin has sold approximately $4 billion worth of military equipment to the socialist regime of Venezuela. In 2007, the regime of Vladimir Putin launched a full-scale cyber attack on its neighbor Estonia. And in 2008, Russia invaded its neighboring country, Georgia, taking control of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. And of course, we know that in 2014, it was the first invasion of Ukraine when Russia took control of Crimea and parts of Luhansk and Donbass. And starting in 2015, the Russian regime began military operations and support to the regime of Bashar al-Assad in Syria, as well as providing air defense systems to the regime in Iran. And of course, in 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In February of 2022, 20 days before the second Russian invasion of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin met with Xi Jinping, and both leaders signed a no-limits friendship agreement in between both nations. Since then, the trade between both nations has increased 63%. The CCP sells to Russia around $300 million worth of dual-use components every month since the war started. These are essential components to Putin's war machine, like microchips and ball bearings that tanks and guided missiles share in common with dishwashers and cars made in China. The CCP has provided Vladimir Putin with diplomatic cover on the world stage by refusing to condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Now, it's important to note that Russia is able to wreak havoc across the world because of the support it receives from the Chinese Communist Party. Since the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Moscow has become the #1 seller of oil to the CCP, and that with those cash inflows that Moscow is receiving by selling discounted oil to China, then Russia can source dual-use components from China, like dishwashers and cars, to fuel its war machine, to give cover to its soldiers in Ukraine, to provide cover for the Iranian missile defense system, and also to sell those $4 billion of weapons equipment to the socialist regime in Venezuela. None of this would be possible without the CCP's no-limits friendship with the Russian regime. It is important to know that the next time that Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping will meet is on May 9th in Moscow during the Victory Day parade celebrations on the Red Square. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping is facing challenges on multiple fronts, not just a heated trade war with the U.S., but as insider sources disclose, Xi is also struggling with infighting within the Chinese regime. As of now, a group of Chinese defense officials who are key to Xi's power framework have been purged from their posts or have disappeared from the public eye. Here's the catch. Officials that remain in key positions are loyalists of another powerful man inside the Communist Party. Who is he, and how is this internal fight shaping Xi's power frame within the regime? NTD's Flora Hua tapped 3 China analysts for insight.
The most notable characteristic of the Chinese military is that it was built not for external defense, but for internal control. Its purpose is not to protect the country, but to safeguard the Chinese Communist Party's regime.
Unlike any elected governments like the United States, the Chinese Communist Party started as a militia without any legal foundation in China. It only climbed to power by ousting China's then legitimate nationalist government, forcing it to flee to Taiwan. The loss came as the nationalists were exhausted by an 8-year war with Japanese forces. For a totalitarian regime, retaining absolute control over its military is essential for top leaders to stay in power. In comparison, the position of U.S. president is filled by winning a democratic election and being sworn into the White House. Likewise, the president becomes the commander-in-chief of the U.S. military during his defined 4-year term. But this is not the case in Communist China. Taking current regime leader Xi Jinping as an example, when he took power in 2013, he carefully and systematically replaced people he didn't trust. He positioned his loyalists to serve in key military positions, which wouldn't threaten his authority. But in the absence of term limits, oftentimes Chinese officials are replaced through political purges in the name of cleaning up corruption. After leading the regime for over a decade, many China experts say Xi has achieved the level of tyranny would make Mao Zedong envious, the man who led communism to take power in China. But here comes a twist. Since last year, suspicions have circulated that Xi's most reliable, trusted officials inside China's military are being targeted by political infighting. Tan Jingyuan is a China affairs commentator who has been working with NTD's Chinese language edition for years.
If Xi Jinping still truly holds absolute power, if he can arrest anyone at will, then how is it possible that he shows no mercy toward his own loyalists, while leaving alone those who are openly disrespectful or pose a clear threat to him? Instead of targeting his real opponents, he's going after people from his own faction. To me, this is inexplicable. The only reasonable explanation is that there is actually a faction within Xi's own camp that's now opposing him. They are using the anti-corruption campaign that Xi himself launched as a tool to purge his influence within the military.
But again, in order to purge Xi's influence, the opposition would first have to purge his loyalists. As for who might be next in line for ouster, speculation has zeroed in on Xi's right-hand man, the third-in-command of China's military, He Weidong. NTD, as well as the Washington Times and Financial Times, reported that He is likely the latest victim of the regime's internal struggles after he disappeared from the public for a month. The news cited the Pentagon, U.S. intelligence, and insider sources in China. His removal could put an end to Xi's control over the military. Another of Xi's military officials may be in a similar situation. Admiral Miao Hua is currently suspended from his duties and under investigation. It's worth noting, both He and Miao served in the same branch in southern China's Fujian province for years. It's also the same place Xi Jinping spent 17 years of his political career before becoming the regime's leader. Qin Peng has been a commentator on Chinese affairs with NTD for years. He pointed out that nepotism is a fundamental theory behind the CCP's appointment of officials instead of individual merit.
Based on loyalty to the leader, regional ties, and factional affiliation, Xi Jinping promoted members of his own faction, such as He Weidong and Miao Hua, thereby consolidating his power. At the same time, he further used his anti-corruption campaign to create room for his trusted allies to gain more influence.
The Chinese military is currently controlled by a group of 6 people, a body known as the Central Military Commission. At its head is regime leader Xi Jinping. Given the apparent ousters of Weidong and Miao Hua, let's take a look at the other 3 who are still active in China's political circle. Those are Vice Chair Zhang Yuxia and members General Liu Zhongli and General Zhang Shengmin. Here's the kicker, the 2 generals are known for their close connections to Vice Chair Zhang. Therefore, with Xi's other 2 loyalists reportedly removed from power, that would leave Xi outnumbered 3-1. Meaning the governing body that controls China's military is now under control of its second-in-command, Vice Chair Zhang Yuxia. And whoever controls the military...
In the Chinese Communist Party system, whoever controls the guns holds the real power within the party. So right now, the anti-Xi faction is focused on seizing Xi Jinping's control over the military. That's the part they're trying to strip away.
Now, this is all business as usual if Zhang remains loyal to leader Xi Jinping. But this may no longer be the case. Zhang Yuxia used to share close ties with Xi Jinping, but Zhang is a veteran general who fought in the Vietnamese War and has extensive war experience and a high reputation within China's military. And like all regime leaders, Xi Jinping has major power ambitions. meaning he likely began to worry that Zhang's influence could threaten his own control.
The Chinese Communist Party's promotion system for military officers also sows the seeds of future factional struggles and instability. This was a key reason behind the eventual breakdown in the relationship between Zhang Yuxia and Xi Jinping.
On top of that, in 2023, Xi removed Zhang's closest aide, Li Shangfu, from China's Central Military Commission, citing serious corruption plots. Li Shangfu had also been China's defense minister. Analysts say the move is essentially what caused a rift between Xi and Zhang. That's because through investigating Li, who was Zhang's aide, Xi could have obtained evidence that could be used to take down Zhang as well. Zooming out, there are other hints that point to Zhang's growing power. Last year, then National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met with Zhang Yuxia in Beijing. The two held talks on defense cooperation between the U.S. and China. What's more, when Zhang visited Vietnam last October, the Vietnamese regime greeted him the same way they received Xi Jinping. Zhang, a senior military official, was able to meet with the country's top leaders. That honor is typically reserved only for the top leaders of foreign countries. Flora Hua, NTD News.
Today, April 25th, marks the 26th anniversary of a historic peaceful appeal in Beijing. Over 10,000 Falun Gong practitioners gathered outside the Chinese Communist Party's central compound in response to a sudden repression by local police. But the event became the prelude to the CCP's nationwide persecution against the spiritual group. NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people about the unfolding of this historic moment.
It's what you'd expect from a country of such as China. You know, the people aren't free.
Well, that's the difference between America and China. We live in a free, open society where people can express themselves, and the bottom line is that it's not like that. And for anyone who is, empowering the way China treats its people, shame on you.
It's an atrocity, to that people can't freely speak, and that's what's created by the United States. We have the right to freely speak, whether you agree or not agree with what people have to say. China's government, oppress their people where they're trying to control them, and I think that's wrong.
Oh, it's horrible. I can't even imagine living in China right now. I can't even imagine what they deal with.
And what's your message to Falun Gong practitioners who are still being jailed and persecuted in China today?
Keep the faith. Keep the faith. Your day will come.
Stay firm in your beliefs. Ultimately, these terrorists are going to crush China. The people are going to uprise. They're not going to be able to sell their manufactured goods. And now they're sitting on ships. They can't get out. And if they can't sell their goods, they can't make a living. Xi's not going to make it long.
Americans aren't against Chinese people. We're against their leadership, who is so cruel to their own people and then to anybody who can take advantage of, any country, any opportunity. So I feel extremely bad for them. I wish there was a way we could help them.
I'd say, keep the faith and keep on plugging along, because that's what America had to endure, and we had a civil war, and eventually we got through some hard times, and hopefully the people of China can get through this hard time.
Coming up, California is boosting its firefighting power from the sky. With peak fire season approaching, Cal Fire officials announced the state's second C-130 air tanker is officially ready for action. Christina Corona has more from the West Coast. And in the NFL, Hulk draft standout quarterback Shedeur Sanders. Dave Martin takes a look back at past stars who fell in the first round when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. After a series of deadly wildfires, California is stepping up its firefighting efforts. Governor Gavin Newsom and Cal Fire officials have added another powerful weapon to the state's aerial firefighting fleet. NTD's Christina Corona has the details.
On Thursday, Governor Gavin Newsom and Cal Fire officials unveiled a new C-130 Hercules air tanker.
There's not another state in the country that is as resourced as the state of California is as it relates to its aerial fighting fleet. It's, in fact, the largest in the world.
It's the second of 7 retrofitted planes designed to drop water and fire retardant. The aircraft were secured through the National Defense Authorization Act. The aircraft can release 4,000 gallons of water or fire retardant in under 5 seconds and fly up to 800 miles per mission, making it the fastest, farthest reaching, and most powerful tanker in CAL FIRE's fleet. And with peak fire season approaching, the need for speed in the air has never been more urgent.
The second air tanker will be placed in Fresno. The third air tanker will initially be here and then move to San Diego and Ramona.
Officials say one air tanker is already flying missions and is based at McClellan Air Base in Sacramento.
We can get anywhere in the state within 20 minutes. These things go fully loaded, 4,000 gallons, and they go about 800 miles, 368 miles in speed. So it's an incredible asset.
The remaining planes will be stationed in Chico, Paso Robles, and Sacramento. Governor Gavin Newsom says these planes have already made a difference across California, with the first tanker already completing 90 missions. But Newsom says they are in need of federal support, saying 57% of the forest land in California is a federal responsibility, with only 3% in the hands of the state.
This administration just cut 10% of the U.S. Forest Service budget. You can't even make that up. That's not risk-taking, that's recklessness.
Officials say adding this aircraft to California's firefighting fleet will help protect lives and property and reduce the impact of smoke on air quality. Christina Corona, NTD News.
And now for your sports news, the NFL draft continues tonight with rounds 2 and 3. Meanwhile, the big question is who will draft Shedeur Sanders? NTD's Dave Martin has more.
Round 1 of last night's NFL draft started off as expected.
With the first pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the Tennessee Titans select Cameron Ward, quarterback, Miami.
After Cam Ward was off the board, Jacksonville then made the first big trade of the night, moving up to the second spot.
The Jacksonville Jaguars select Travis Hunter, wide receiver, defensive back from Colorado.
After Hunter's selection, though, a storyline soon emerged. Which team would draft standout quarterback Shedeur Sanders? Sanders, son of Hall of Famer Deion Sanders, had previously been thought to go in the top 3 picks, if not first overall. Instead, the Heisman Trophy finalist is still available as we head into round 2 tonight. Now, this isn't the first time a high-profile quarterback fell in round 1. NFL Hall of Famer Brett Favre saw his stock slip to the second round before being taken by Atlanta 3 decades ago. His successor, 4-time MVP Aaron Rodgers, slid to the 24th pick back in 2005. And even the great Dan Marino fell to the end of the first round all the way back in 1984, where the Dolphins gladly took him. Sanders could certainly follow the same script. The second round begins tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Elsewhere in sports news, Kobe Bryant's debut jersey sold for $7 million on Thursday, the 4th most ever paid for such an item, trailing only game-worn jerseys by Babe Ruth, Michael Jordan, and Diego Maradona. Bryant's was photo matched to his preseason and regular season debuts back in 1996. The Hall of Famer was drafted straight out of high school and went on to lead the Lakers to 5 NBA titles in his 20 seasons. Bryant won a pair of scoring titles and retired in 2016 with the 3rd most points in NBA history. Previously, the most ever paid for a Bryant collectible was $5.85 million for a game-worn jersey from his MVP season of 2008. This is Dave Martin for NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. Round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.